Hello there. Today we have Ephesians chapter 2 in our Solid Life reading plan, and just a verse is standing out for me that I want to share with you and just touch on. And it's Ephesians 2, verse 19. Now therefore, you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God. And this verse kind of reminds me of a time when I was traveling and I was in Europe, and I was actually in Britain at the time, and I was staying at a bed and breakfast. Now, these people hadn't had any guests for a long time. They told me I was the first in many months. And so I just arrived and I was loading my cases into my room. There's a little lady, lovely lady, short little lady who was such a gracious host, welcomed me in, showed me the room. And I quickly got my cases in. Now, I was up there for a few minutes and, maybe a little while. And all of a sudden, I hear one of the biggest belches, I've ever heard in the house. And it was this little lady. And I was just, my jaw was down. And I just lost it in my little room there. But what had happened, obviously, she's so used to no one's there. And she just, the call of nature sometimes, and it just comes out. And of course, when we get really familiar with our family, and when we're members of a household, there's times where the odd burp, the odd belch comes out, and we give out an excuse me, sorry, oops. But there's a real familiarity there. When there's a guest over, especially if it's someone you're not very familiar with, you're not going to be doing that. And, of course, I never mentioned anything. I was gracious about it, but I did have a bit of a giggle, of course, at this particular time. This was many years ago. But it kind of makes me think about this verse, now therefore, you're no longer strangers. You're no longer foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God. You, if you're a believer, are a member of the household of God. Not one day, already. There is an opportunity for, definitely a wrong familiarity with God, but there's also, I believe, a familiarity with God that he's longing for, where I'm a member of the household. We can often, without approaching him and being someone who's a daily reader of his word, being someone who doesn't daily connect with him, we start to shrink back into a relationship with him that I believe actually gets quite stagnant. And we forget that there's a connection with our Father, not our God. He is our God, but not just our God, our Father. And that means you're a member of his household. You're his child. There's a familiarity that he's longing for that you would have. And you'll know, because if it's like my children, they're familiar with me. They'll walk straight in. They need something. They're coming and asking for it. And they're longing to have a connection with me that's not a stranger. Same with Elisa. They don't want her to be a stranger. They want to be able to approach us in that manner. Where they're members of a household, they have that opportunity. And that's the same with how it's meant to be with our walk with God. A good thing for you to reflect on today in relation to this verse is just think about your approach to God. Has your relationship with him gotten distant, stagnant, or are you connected, but maybe you need to take it to another level? We start really zeroing in on your Father as your Father and saying, Lord, I'm your child and I have some needs here. I have some wants. I have some desires, but also, I just want to hang out with you as my Father and approach him that way. I know he loves that, longs for that. And let's all have a fresh look at Ephesians 2, verse 19, and let's take that to the next level in our walk with him. Members of the household of God. What a blessing, what a privilege. Tomorrow is the National Day of Prayer, and we're in a 40-day fast. I want to remind you to take a fresh look at your prayer time with Him, your fasting, and know that fasting makes a massive difference and influences and impacts things in a very different way, oftentimes when we're praying and fasting. God has told us this. He honors that. There is an impact that is there that might not necessarily be there when we're not fasting. So know that you know when you're praying and fasting, there is a huge, devastating impact against the enemy and his devices on this earth, in our houses, and in the church. So let's embrace this National Day of Prayer, our day of our 40 days of prayer and fasting, and our May 17th opportunity for 24 hours of prayer as a church family, where you go to the rocksealbeachlive.com and click on the 24-hour prayer sign up and choose your slot and fill out your details and send that off. Let's be ready for this time of prayer where the Lord is establishing things and implementing things and putting things in place that He's never been able to before, because we're members of the household of God and in a great season of prayer. Love you very much. So blessed to be connecting with you today. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye for now.